Welcome to Implement This with Microsoft Business Solutions MVP Britta Rexstead and co-host Matthew C. Anderson, where we have an insider's discussion around the things we consider when implementing Dynamics 365. In today's episode, Britta and I discuss the humble, out-of-the-box charts for Dynamics 365 and model-driven PowerApps. The user group for the Dynamics 365 and CRM community is powered by users for users and specializes in the delivery of member-driven education, networking, and events to help you maximize your current Microsoft Dynamics investment. They're the world's most influential user group community of Microsoft Dynamics 365 and CRM users and partners. Across the globe, members share a common goal of maximizing and advancing the performance of Microsoft Dynamics 365 so that individuals and companies can improve operations, overcome obstacles, and exceed goals. We thank CRMUG for their sponsorship, and now on with the show. Now we're back with another episode of Implement This. Hi, Britta. How are you?
Good, Matt. How are you doing?
I'm excited to be recording again.
Me too.
Yes. And today we don't have a listener question. We've been getting through a bunch of those, and I'll just do a quick plug early on in this episode. Hey, we want to respond to your questions, so let's get that funnel filled back up. We had to wait for a while on some of your questions as they came in, so we are ready for more of those if you have them, and I don't know about you, Britta, but I think they're out there.
Yes. Oh, definitely. Yep.
Okay.
So keep them coming.
So for an episode for today, I thought that going back to something that's very core to Dynamics 365, especially considering that some folks are going to be new to the platform through, experiencing it as the common data service, and, hitting some of these topics like, I think charts in Dynamics 365 is a pretty worthy potential topic.
I think it's getting a little controversial because I don't know if some people believe we still need charts.
Ooh. Well, what do those people think we need?
Well, Power BI. I mean, Power BI is the, exciting new sparkly one.
Power BI is fantastic. And it is, in my perspective, it is a yes and story for charts inside of Dynamics, whether that's through CDS or whether that's through some of the traditional apps within Dynamics 365 and Power BI, because, frankly, they work so very different and they are tools for different jobs.
Okay, so I think we probably have plenty to talk about there then.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, so in defense of charts then, defend charts against Power BI. Why should we still, so someone's new and they've already kind of dabbled in Power BI and been excited by that. Why should they still learn charts? Yeah,
so a couple of different things. One is it is the most easy way to work with lists of records that is going to abide by the security model that you have in place. So whether it's a user, whether it's an admin logged in, as they are building out a chart or going to be looking at a chart that's summarizing information, it's always going against that security filtered view of what it is that you're supposed to see. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to worry about it. As an admin or a power user, you don't have to worry about whether you're accidentally giving someone permission to see something that they're not supposed to be able to report on.
Okay, so baked in security context. So what are the risks then with Power BI? I haven't played with that enough to break the security model with Power BI.
Well, so when you are using something like Power BI, you are doing that in the context of a set of data that's being summarized with Power BI, and in that summary, it doesn't include the security table behind the scenes. The POA table is not used to see, okay, based on who's currently looking at this report, what privileges do they have, where do they sit, and that kind of thing. So when you're looking at something in Power BI, there are a couple of different cases it could be. One is it might have been created by an individual user. There's no security concern because when they brought that into Power BI, they're looking at records based on what it was that they could see already. It's using their user to authenticate with. So you don't really have to worry, any more than you otherwise would based on the records they can see.
Okay, so I think that's good to clarify. That as an admin, you don't have to be afraid of your users using Power BI. That security context you're used to, it's still there.
Yeah.
But it sounds like there's probably more to the story.
Yeah. So let's say you are a power user, maybe an admin who has greater privileges. You create something in Power BI and start to share that out with other people. When you share that out with other people using Power BI, all of a sudden you have to think about whether the people that you're sharing that with should have access to see what it is that you're summarizing there, because
it's your context,
it's
not
your
theirs.
context, it's your elevated privilege for that. And there are certainly creative ways to be able to work around that. That's probably an episode of its own another time. But when you're using the out-of-the-box charting capability in Dynamics 365, you can create charts, summaries to your heart's content, share that out with somebody, and there's absolutely no risk of somebody seeing something they're not supposed to.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah. So, thinking through that, I mean, we've talked about a couple of different ways that we can do reporting. We'll focus in on the core charting context, and the first way that most people will see or interact with that is, of course, our favorite chart wizard inside of Dynamics. How much do you use the chart wizard, Britta?
I avoid it if I can. I'm dyslexic, and the whole XY axis thing makes me break out in hives. So.
Well, that's when you use
like
that's when you use the pie chart. I mean, no.
Oh yes, the very useful pie chart, because every user's eye exactly knows what percentage that represents in a pie chart. Yep.
Yeah. So, but with it, I mean, it is a means to an end type of tool to be able to put together those standard types of visualizations, things like bar charts, things like stacked bar charts, line charts, pie charts. There's an out of the box funnel chart, and let's not use this podcast episode today to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of using different chart types and whether the funnel chart is a good visualization or not.
Or the pie chart. We'll just not bash any chart formats today. We'll stay nice.
But I digress. But so you can choose based on, you start in the context of a view in Dynamics. So you have some records that you're going to be summarizing, and then you can choose the columns in which you either want to group those, have your different kind of bars in the bar chart or slices in the pie chart or so forth. What are those groupings that you're going to have? And then what are you going to be summarizing? Is it going to be a count of records? Is it going to be a sum of, say, a numeric field? Maybe it's a currency field that you're using, and so forth. And there's awareness based on, if it's a currency field, on the chart that it builds out, include things, with the appropriate currency symbol for whoever is using it. So a lot of that work that would be done to be able to, make sure people have good labels and that kind of thing, it's just done automatically through the charting wizard.
Well, it's done automatically, and hopefully you like what you get.
Yeah, that is the other side of it. Sometimes you get a bunch of stuff on the graph, and it gets a little bit busy.
Yeah.
Or you have some bars that are of vastly different size, or you have the pie chart that looks like it's somebody made it with a spirograph because there's so many different many different line or wedges coming out of it.
Yeah, I found when I was using this for gamification back before we had gamification tools we could use, I had one user that actually she'd blow up the charts. She wasn't allowed to be on the chart. So it was just known that she was so good that she wasn't even on the chart because it so distorted it, because she had so much activity in the system that it just totally blew it up. She was office manager and had just so much impact on everything that anyone touched that it blew up the chart. So it's kind of funny how that can impact things sometimes. I do like to use those top-bottom rules. I think that can help clear up the noise. You don't want to look at every account you have in the system. So
talk about the top-bottom rules. What are those? What does that actually give you kind of visibility to?
Well, it's really nice. You can either pick, I think it's 3, 5, and 10, and then there's actually a custom one too. But the idea of that is if you wanted to make a bar chart of all of your accounts by their value, that is a terrible idea for a chart. It's not actionable at all. What you're probably looking for are what are our lowest performing accounts, or what are our top accounts. Or there's probably some grouping you're looking for to rise to the top or sink to the bottom. And so just zoom in the chart on that. So it's right there in the chart wizard, really, really easy. And just take some of the overwhelm out of it. Otherwise, you end up with slivers so small that all the text is overlapping, so you can't read it anyway, and the chart isn't actionable. And I think that's, in all charting, what we should do is we want to have a gut reaction out of the user to go, I need to go do X, whether it's, wow, those are really great accounts, or man, I need to get my phone calls up today, or something else.
Something that surprises them, something that is going to inspire action or response out of them in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. They should have a reaction. They should know what it is. Something that I learned from Chuck Sterling, who is I don't even know how you sum up Chuck, but if you want to know anything about Power BI, you have to follow Chuck Sterling at Microsoft. But he said what you're supposed to do when you build out a dashboard of charts is step back, have someone look at it from 20, 30 feet away and tell you what emotional reaction they have. What the red seems bad. Ooh, there's a lot of blue. I wonder what the blue is. But have them have a reaction to it without seeing the labels, because they're too far away to get detail. But there should be something in that dashboard that triggers something for them, and you can usually tell even at a distance without the labels. And if you don't need the labels to trigger the reaction, you probably did a pretty good job.
Yeah, that's a good tip.
He's pretty amazing. There's a really good presentation on Visually Stunning. I can throw a link to it in the show notes, but he has a really great 1 hour session. It's for Power BI, but honestly, it's how you design visually stunning reports. And so it's a lot of rules and the science behind art, really. So very cool.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be just Power BI.
Very cool. So going back to the top X rules that you were chatting about there, a couple of things to just hammer home with that I think make it particularly cool is when you're building that chart, it's going to look at an aggregate, whatever aggregate that you have, and do all the summarization of all the accounts that you're looking at, accounts if that's what you're grouping on, and do that sum, and then find the top number, top 3, top 5, what have you. What's cool about that is it will bring that context along with it based on whichever view that you have open as a user, or if it's embedded into a dashboard, whatever view is used to build that. So when you're using the chart wizard, you may start with all accounts as you're building it, just so you have kind of a lot of variable data to be able to work with. And then when you actually go to deploy it, you can pick and choose, maybe we're going to focus on a specific region within the world, or maybe we're going to focus on a particular sales rep or customer service rep, or those kind of things. And that aggregation is then based on the context of kind of that use case that you're going to have. So it's different from, if you were going to look for the top 3 customers company-wide and then try to put that out there, because the top 3 customers of the company are the same no matter who you are, which can be great if that's what you're trying to surface for people. But that's one of the places where the charts inside of Dynamics are very contextual for people, and a cool way to do that. Now, there are some other ways in which that context can be very helpful is embedding charts, and this is something more than an admin would do, but embedding charts onto a record form, and having them be adhering to the security model as far as what you're seeing there, but being able to give a nice visual representation. I think of a classic one of looking at kind of revenue over time, whether that's committed revenue or actual recognized revenue over time for a specific client. It's a very straightforward way to be able to get that in there if you have that data sitting inside of the Dynamics platform.
It can be amazing for getting outside of just looking at a view or looking at a dashboard. I had a project where we needed to prepare reps for their meetings. So we ended up making a custom entity that had a whole bunch of charts and lists and things on it. But what it did is it gave them a dashboard that was unique to that client. And that's something we can't do yet. Is you could go through and change little context here and there, but we can't look at our dashboard and then say, okay, but give me this dashboard in context of the specific customer and have it all update. That's something we need Power BI for. But it gave us that opportunity out of the box to say, here you go, here's all the things you should be thinking about for this specific customer walking into this meeting. And having charts right on the record gave us that. And it was really nicely in context with whatever customer they were looking at the time.
Cool. So, kind of circling back, we wandered into the area where an admin is going to be kind of putting these things onto a record form in that way. And it's also worth making a distinction here that similar to when you're building out views inside of the platform, we have both personal charts as well as system charts. So personal charts being ones that are created by a user and then either shared out with their manager or with a team, and then system charts that are going to be created by someone with that system customizer role or system admin role, who are going to kind of put those together and have them either be available to everybody, or as you're building out an app experience within Dynamics or within CDS, you can pick and choose which of those system views system charts rather should be available as part of seeing that. And then when someone goes to look at a list of records later on, you can choose to either see the chart pane on either the side or the top of that list, and when you put that out there, it will give you your option of looking through either system charts or individual user charts. Now, for this conversation, we start talking about system charts, the concept of solution awareness comes up. So do we have solution awareness for our charts, Britta?
Yes and no. It all depends. This gets back to our ever-popular personal versus system. And this is an area that I actually use a lot more personal of something than I do system. And the reason for that is that I will make the baseline charts and dashboards that I feel like users need. And then for the picky users, I really strongly encourage them to either befriend a power user to get those built or build them themselves. And so that's a way to allow people to have some creative control over what they want, what they really care about and what they want to drill into. Just always reminding them that we can't move those. So it doesn't matter so much in production, because if your user lives in production and their views are in production, I don't really care. I don't have to move those between environments. So it is a problem if you do like a re-implementation, instead of an in-place upgrade or something like that. But in general, it works pretty well.
Yeah, and what's interesting about charts compared to something like views is charts, even on the personal side, are a little bit more portable than things like views would be, because for your charts, when you go through the chart wizard, you can actually save a small file down to your desktop, your downloads folder that includes the details about what's being actually built out. It's written in XML, and we're not focused toward developers here on Implement This, but XML is a markup language that kind of describes, okay, based on the things that are inside of the common data service here, how do we take that, group things, and actually put that visualization together? You can then save that back, upload it back into the system and be able to have another copy of that, or if it was in another instance of Dynamics, assuming you have the same entities and data model in place, you are able to kind of bring those over. Now, it's not as systematic or easy as just exporting your solution and importing it in somewhere else. It's a little more manual of doing that, but those options are available.
Yeah, and XML. So we're not catering to developers here, but I would say XML, if you're not a developer but you wish you played one on TV, XML editing is probably for you. I remember I had only been in Dynamics a couple weeks, and I was watching a training video on how to, I think it was change the colors in a chart or something, and I had the XML pulled up on my screen, and one of my new coworkers walked past and like, oh wow, oh, you're a real nerd. I was like, yeah, I am. I was just like, changing like the human readable text in like one line of XML and then re-importing it. But you feel very, very cool. So if you've ever aspired to be a developer, this is actually a pretty safe place to play, because worst case scenario, you blow up the chart and it won't re-import. Yeah. So you're not going to crash the server. You're not going to create some crazy automation that's going to go kill things or spawn and grow and take over the system. It's a chart. The world won't end. So if you ever wanted to really play, we've talked about it a lot before and obviously will again, but CRM Chart Guy amazing blog, lots of places there to play if you want to adjust XML a little bit.
Yeah.
It is a fun area.
Yeah, and just call it out, CRMChartGuy.com. And if you go to his website, he has a nice little introduction on kind of what you can have control over out there, and then a ton of little tips on all these different things that you can tweak and examples. It shows what you would actually change inside of the fetch or inside of the XML definition of that chart. And it's pretty approachable. The first time you do it, if you don't have some sort of coding background, it's going to look like gobbledygook on the screen. But it is one of those very logical things that it's written in a human readable way. And the kind of the foundations of understanding kind of what XML is and how to start being able to read that is a skill that can be very powerful for their contexts, outside of Dynamics. It's certainly one I've encouraged people to understand more, even if they're not a, push your glasses up your nose nerd, because it's not over a crazy line to be able to get there. And what I will say is, if you're going to get started on that kind of thing, you don't need a bunch of fancy software or tooling. You can start in something as simple as Notepad. I would recommend either Notepad++, or I've been using VS Code, which is a free code editor that's available from Microsoft for being able to go through those. And it gives you a lot of kind of help along the way, as far as making sure that you follow a good structure as you're building out XML. So
yeah, you can do anything in Notepad, and if people who are really hardcore, do that, or if you're in a hurry. But it is really nice, especially when you're really new, to get into a tool that will color code things and give you numbered lines and things like that. It can just really help you keep with the syntax, because in all things code, a comma blows it up. So you have one wrong character in a wrong place, and all of a sudden it throws everything off. So it is good to be in a tool that works like that. But I think everyone, even admins, even knowing how to just do basic things like change the color scheme in an out-of-the-box chart, you probably have business reasons why. Like, I worked in finance. We don't use the color red in finance.
Yeah.
Red is bad. You don't just put red in happy charts and pretend it's fine. You just don't. And so that's something that you can teach yourself to do without going back to school to learn to be a developer.
Yeah, and what I will say is there's now, as of fairly recently, a nice middle ground for some of that. If you're willing to use the XrmToolBox, which we've talked about here on Implement This a number of different times, but there's actually a tool called the Advanced Chart Editor, who the aforementioned CRM Chart Guy and some other folks have been involved with in developing. And basically all of those things that you can go and manually tweak by going into the XML, this gives you a front-end editor to be able to work with those things. So if you want to change colors, information about the labels, what's on an axis, or how you're labeling axes, or thickness of lines, or any of those different things along the way that you could do using code and getting into that XML. If you just don't want to do that, there is this tool that's available as part of XrmToolBox. So that's a good option too, especially if you're trying to do colors.
Yeah, there's so many good tools
out there. Hate going in and doing
there
color codes. I always screw it up.
that will tell you what colors to use. You can pick a primary, and it will give you related colors that are nice. And that Visually Stunning Reports link that we'll throw down the show notes, that has some links to some nice tools there. I want to flip back to talking about the business side of it a little bit.
Yeah.
And that is something that I had never really thought about till Clarissa Simpson, another MVP, brought it up, is this idea of governance. And the thing is, sometimes we get really excited about what we can do or what we can even empower users to do. And the thing is, if we have good adoption in the system and it's actually being used, then this data and these charts are being used to make business decisions. And in a big company, these are really expensive, big decisions that are getting made on this data. And so you don't want to run around crazy wild and have a chart that's going to inform a really expensive decision, have a bad assumption in it. And so I think it is a good idea to step back and have some governance practices. Now, it's one thing if a user is trying to decide, just from an actionability standpoint, what they need to do. But for the really important things, especially executive reporting and that kind of thing, you need to step back and have someone outside of yourself, especially someone who's maybe a subject matter expert, question your assumptions. How did you determine that was actually a lot of reporting isn't as simple as highest revenue on an account. It's usually more complicated than that. So you usually want to get a couple opinions to look at that and go, but you got to factor in zip code, because if you don't factor in zip code, the whole territory thing blows up. You need somebody to do that for you. So definitely learn it and encourage your users to learn it, but also take a step back and think about the level of impact your reporting will have, and make sure that you have an appropriate level of scrutiny for the level of impact.
Yeah, I know that's a great point. And just to hammer that home a little bit more, I mean, there are oftentimes little idiosyncrasies with the data that your average user isn't going to be aware of.
Yeah.
We have all of our closed won opportunities out here, so we use that to determine how much revenue we have, right? Oh, what do you mean if there's some sort of return or reversal that's going in under, maybe it's going in under another sales order, and it's never actually reflected as a kind of a negative opportunity to net that out. If you only go against opportunities and you don't know that, you could be artificially inflating things without even knowing that, there's just this other place that goes, or maybe there's a flag of things that need to be filtered out, all those little things along the way. So certainly that's a great point.
There's probably someone in something like that. It's probably someone in a department other than the department you work in. So whether you're in IT or you're in sales or you're in marketing, there's probably somebody in accounting or some other area of the business who's going to have an opinion on what actually counts for a lot of these numbers. So don't just ask the nerd in the cube next to you. Probably get out of your department and talk to somebody.
Yeah, and I think, just the communication with other people around what information is there and how you're using it, just having that type of discussion rather than doing things in a bubble is just a good practice. Especially, if you're, early on in implementation, it can seem like, but we're going to get bogged down with having to have a conversation about a decision that's going to be, it can seem not even worth the effort as you think about that. But this is something that the more you just proactively communicate around it, the greater likelihood it is that you're going to catch those mistakes. I mean, this is not something unique to Dynamics. Any platform like this has these types of potential gotchas if you're not communicating. Excel is the same way. Where huge assumptions are made within an Excel model, and all of a sudden, if the wrong person is working with that data, they don't plug in the same assumptions, they come to a radically different conclusion, and it's not based on the realities of the source data that original person knew about.
And it's important for your implementation to defend the accuracy of the data. And sometimes you can make the data look inaccurate because you reported on it wrong. And that can really threaten people's perception of the system. And if the system is trustworthy and the system is worth getting all the data in, or even the perception of if people are using the system. If it seems like, the numbers you're getting are entirely different than the numbers accounting is getting.
Yeah.
Well, if you're not factoring the assumptions, then it looks like maybe you're missing data when maybe you're not. It's just you got to be a little sensitive there.
All right. As far as, kind of in closing, I think there's one other gotcha that I just want to, bring up just so folks are aware as they're working with these, because they are based on a query of records through a view. There are limitations on how many records are actually going to come back in a view. So if you're talking hundreds of thousands of records that you have out there that you're trying to summarize, some of them could be cut out, if they're not already filtered out in the view that you're working with. So be aware of those kind of things, especially as you work on large-scale aggregation. Especially activities and that kind of thing can get to be, very large numbers, and you have to keep those types of little things in context as you're building them out.
Also think about performance. If you have a default dashboard for everyone in the organization, and that has to run against a very big data set and do a lot of aggregation, and the first thing everyone does on Monday morning is load that dashboard, you can maybe run into some performance issues. So when you're
never happen.
So you just want to keep that in mind with your really, really big data sets. There's so many enterprise best practices out there and great presentations and things on that topic. But just think about that. If this takes a while for you to run on your computer, how long is it going to take when everyone in the organization by default loads this chart on Monday morning? It can really, it can have a really big impact.
All right. Any final thoughts?
No.
All right. Well, get out there, start charting.
Good luck.
You've been listening to Implement This with Britta Rexted and Matthew C. Anderson. Do you have a business problem you'd like us to discuss on the show? Reach us through our website, implementthis.org, where you can also subscribe to the podcast. We're on Twitter, too. Britta is at MacGyver CRM, and I'm at MC Anderson. Thanks so much for listening.